I've never heard
see.
any much being talked about China and podcasts. Do they do podcasts? What's going on over there?
I mean,
That's a huge country.
They do. Apple Podcasts is different there. Apple Podcasts, you have to be whitelisted to get into the individual Apple Podcasts for China. So there are only specific publishers which are in Apple Podcasts there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one side. And I think, the journalism that I've seen coming out of China seems to have a very different definition of what a podcast is. And it seems to include a lot of things that we necessarily wouldn't have included as being a podcast, like an audiobook. That's clearly a very different thing. And audio courses, paid audio courses, those I wouldn't call a podcast, but the Chinese journalists seem to think are still podcasts as well. So my understanding is that, China is a pretty good and exciting place for on-demand audio. And I know that the Chinese government have been looking into it because, of course, it's a way of expressing thoughts and things that may not necessarily align with some of the things that they're looking at. So, it's a really interesting thing. But again, all of China works in a very different way because
everything is different.
because there isn't a Google Podcasts there. I don't think there's a Spotify there. Apple Podcasts is different, and so they've got lots of their own podcast apps which are impenetrable to people like us because, of course, we don't speak the language, and so therefore, you have a look at Himalaya, which is one of the big ones, or you have a look at there's one called it's called after a strawberry or a lychee fruit, and so you look at these apps, and they are completely different. And so I think there's that language barrier and culture barrier that just makes life hard.